Hello, and welcome to a quick tour of the elements of design used by fashion designers. In fact, we can all use the elements of design when we select and combine colors, shapes, and styles. You can think of the elements of design as a designer's toolbox. They include line, shape, color, texture, and pattern. In my next video, I'll discuss the principles of design, which is how designers use these tools to create a harmonious design. But first, let's look at line. There are three types of lines: straight, curved, and jagged. In fashion, line can refer to structural lines, such as seam lines, or decorative lines, as in both of these skirts. Balmain on the left, Gucci on the right. Which would you say is more feminine? Which one is more powerful, more youthful, more sophisticated? Straight lines tend to be seen as strong, formal, and perhaps more serious and even masculine. Curved lines suggest the lines of nature and are softer and more feminine. Designers can use line to create optical illusions. In each of these lines here, the horizontal lines are the exact same length, but B and D definitely appear shorter because the eye can only travel so far. Whereas in A, and even more so C, the eye is invited to keep traveling. Which one looks tallest? Most formal, most casual, most dynamic? We're often told that vertical lines are more slimming, but a lot has to do with the spacing of the lines as well. Vertical lines tend to be formal, strong, and dignified. Horizontal stripes can be very fun and flattering. Horizontal lines are restful, calm, relaxed, and casual. Diagonal lines are the most interesting to the eye because they suggest action, movement, instability, excitement, interest, and drama. Let's see the effect that line can have on this little black dress. First, by lowering the neckline, we actually create more visual length. Then, what happens if we add a vertical line down the center? The eye is carried up the dress to the wearer's face, creating an illusion of height. What about adding any horizontal lines? Horizontal lines added to just below the bust can add visual width to the bust line, and just the legs are lengthened. A horizontal line at the waist emphasizes the waist, and the torso is lengthened. Stacking horizontal lines from the waist to the bust can be very flattering, as they create almost a staircase for the eye to travel from waist to bust to face. Diagonal lines are seen in wrapped clothing, as in the gorgeous draping of a sari. Notice that the diagonal is more horizontal at the bust line, adding visual width, and more vertical below the waist, as adding visual length. However, designers must be careful with the use of diagonal lines. Look how line is used to create this Transformer's face. This is Optimus Prime, and the straight lines convey his power and strength. The diagonal lines move from the center upwards, showing vitality and motion. Now watch what happens when we turn his face upside down. He gets old. The diagonal lines now droop from the center downward. Instead of adding lift, they are dragging him down. This is the power of line. Moving on to shape. In fashion, shape and form most often refer to the silhouette, as in these classic gown shapes. Most of our silhouettes conform to these classic styles. The mermaid silhouette can be seen in this body-conscious dress from Azzedine Alaïa, but some silhouettes break all the rules, as in this body-concealing sweater dress from Issey Miyake. It's cozy and huggable, but perhaps not exactly flattering. Silhouettes change over time and are readily identifiable. See the silhouette with the bustle on the left. We know that it is either 1870s or 80s, in contrast to the more modern silhouettes on the right. Different parts of the body can be exaggerated or downplayed depending on the silhouette. Moving on to color. The most important and most complex of the elements is color. Color is so important that large design companies subscribe to expensive color services such as Pantone. Pantone researches and predicts color trends about 2 years ahead of time. There are 3 facets to color: hue, saturation, and value. Hue refers to the pure spectrum colors. Each of these greens is the same hue, with only white added, but no other hue. Saturation or intensity refers to the brightness or dullness of a color. Hot pink is more intense and saturated with hue than dusty rose is. The muted card on the right has much less pigment in it. You can see in the color matrix here that they both contain hue, but the one on the left is saturated with more color while the one on the right has had some color removed to make room for black and white. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. A strong blue has much more color value than a pure yellow, and when I convert the image to black and white, you can see that the blue is nearly black, while the yellow has the color value equivalent of a light gray. While hue is circular like the color wheel, value is linear, as in these value scales toward the bottom of the card. You can see that this particular blue has a value of 89, while this yellow is only 11. Value is what makes some colors so much more visible than others. Yellow cannot hold its own against other colors. You can change the value of a hue by adding white to create a tint, black to create a shade, and gray to create a tone. The saturation of the three on the right, the tint, shade, and tone, are the same in that they all are now half strength, the tint being half white, the shade being half black, and the tone being half gray. The saturation is the same, but the values are different, with the shade having the most color value and the tint having the least. Color schemes can be warm, cool, or neutral. Canva.com has a fun color wheel that you can choose various color combinations on. A monochromatic color scheme is tints, tones, and shades of the same hue. Here, all shades of the same hue of blue. A complementary color scheme uses two colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. An analogous scheme uses three colors side by side on the wheel. A triadic scheme uses three colors that are equidistant on the wheel. This is easier and more appealing if the colors are muted, otherwise it can be too much. Let's move on to texture. Smooth, matte textures make areas look smaller. Rough or shiny textures make areas look bigger. Contrasts in texture adds both visual interest and tactile interest. We want to touch these textures. That interesting leafy texture on the left works beautifully on the hip, but the designer wisely kept the waist smooth. Back to our little black dress example. Texture added around the neckline and bust line can be very flattering, but you might not want to add a heavily textured belt, as it would add visual weight to the waist. In fashion, unlike fine art, the fifth element is often pattern. Prints function a lot like texture, adding visual volume, but they can also add personality. They can be masculine, feminine, conservative, bold, soft, or dramatic. Because they attract the eye, designers place them where they want to draw attention and to balance out the figure. Mixing prints with solids is a safe bet, but mixing different prints can also be fun. So those are the elements of fashion, the tools designers use. How they put them together will be discussed in my next video, The Principles of Fashion Design. Thanks so much for watching.